Hello everyone, welcome to this course on Exadata Cloud Service Backup and Recovery. My name is Bal Sharma. I am part of Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Product Management team. Before we get into this course, this is our safe harbor statement and I will take a pause here so that you can read it. So at the end of this training, you should have an understanding on how we configure backup as well as how to do recoveries on Exadata Cloud Service using the APIs provided by Oracle. You should be also able to understand the prerequisites before starting with backup configuration. You should be able to verify how to check for any existing backup configuration on the XRCS system before attempting to make any backup configuration changes. I am also going to briefly cover available tools and assistant for getting you started with the configuration. You should be able to create a backup configuration file, install the same for any database you want backup to be configured. You should be able to understand how to do on-demand backups as well as scheduled backup and how they work, how to customize them, and how to take a backup and list backups or do restore from the backups you have already taken. You should be able to understand basic troubleshooting in case if backups have any issues. And at the end, I will take you to a demo environment and I will show you the same concepts like what we are going to discuss in this particular session. So Exadata supports backup of a database, basically two options. So one is in the object storage bucket that is known as cloud backup. And the other option is a local backup, which is getting done on the recovery area, which we configure with Exadata Cloud Service Provisioning. So you need to have a backup configuration file, which will specify the backup destination and when that backup is going to run, how long those backups are going to be retained. And if the backup destination is object storage, the file also contains the credentials to access that particular service. And what I mean by credentials is the user who has access to your object storage bucket, and it will be associated with a URL and user credential with a Auth Token as the password. So as the next step, you are going to associate the backup configuration file with a database, and the database will be backed up as scheduled, or you can also create an on-demand backup in case you need. So one of the note here is you must update the cloud specific tooling on all the compute nodes in the Exadata database system before you perform the backup restore procedures. And there are various ways to update the cloud tooling. You can use either dbus CLI command. Dbus CLI patch tools list will list you all the available tooling on your system, and then you have an option to update it to the latest by using apply clause within dbus CLI, or it depends. So we have several other ways also to update this tooling. So you can basically query from your system that which specific version of dbus tool you have, and then you can use the exadbc patch sm command to perform the activity. So these things are mentioned in this link on updating an Exadata database system. Coming to the prerequisites of backup and restore, Exadata database system requires access to the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Object Storage Service, and Oracle also recommends to use a service gateway with the VCN to enable this access. And this is what we have briefly discussed when we were looking at Exadata Cloud Service Overview, where I created a service gateway and associated the same with the backup configuration. Means the routing rule to your object storage bucket was configured as part of provisioning. You need to have an object storage bucket which will be used as your backup destination. You can do this or create object storage bucket using either console or using the object storage API. Another thing you have to do is to create a Auth token on your Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Again, you can use either console or the IAM API to generate this particular password. You need to have the username, which will be specified in backup configuration file, and it must have the tenancy level access to object storage. So you need to have a policy which will allow you to access the object storage bucket within your tenancy, and policies can be written by your administrator. One of the example is allow group name to read bucket in a compartment with your compartment name. So just make sure before attempting this that you have acquired privilege or access to your object storage bucket, because you are going to provide those credentials in your backup configuration. So let's take a look at the prerequisites, which is basically required networking configuration for backup to work. So two important things here. One is the service gateway and the other one is backup subnet. So before you configure backups, you have to make sure subnet for backup is associated with routing through service gateway, and that is the one like which facilitate access to object storage. So coming to backup subnet, XRCS uses a separate backup subnet, which we have seen during provisioning of Exadata environment. And this backup subnet is going to reside on a private subnet. We use private subnet for all of the database deployments. In your case, it might look like this here, like which is shown. So you have a private subnet, in my case, subbrief bkp_bal, and it is like it is associated with a routing table, which is brief in my case, and there's several security list which is associated in my environment. So make sure that like you create a service gateway and define the routing rule, which you might have already done for the service gateway, and you can also have a specific rule which is very unique to just backups. In my case, I have used a NAT gateway, but that is not the requirement. I had some other purpose. I wanted to reach out to internet from my database environment, but necessarily you don't need it. Its service gateway is able to provide all of the services access within Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So it might look like, in your case, you can check the service gateway configuration, which should be available, and it will be either related to all IAD service in Oracle Service Network, in which case it can also help you with patching or any service within OCI environment. It could be just set with just object storage. So either case, backup is going to work. And if you take a look at the routing table, in my case Prev, it will also confirm that you have the service gateway associated for the routing rule. So in my case, all IAD service in Oracle Service Network through service gateway confirms that it is already configured and backups are going to work. The another thing, like we discussed, that you need to have a Auth token for your object storage bucket. For those who are new to OCI, you can log into your console and go under users, and for your particular user, you will have a Auth token on your left hand side on the console. So select that one, and it provides you an option to generate an Auth token. So you see here there is a button, generate token. Right now I have no Auth tokens within my console, so I'm going to create Auth token for user balsarma@oracle.com. Click on generate token, and you can specify a description for it, why you want this and for what purpose it is going to be used, and it will generate a random token for you. So you need to copy this particular value and keep it in a safe place, because it will not display the same token next time when you want to use it. So once the prerequisites are done, this slide talks about what are different assistants and tools available for backup. And if you see here, we have a directory called as var opt oracle on each of the XRCS DOMUs, and inside that var opt oracle you have backup API, and backup API is the one like which takes the heavy duty. It takes care of like all of your backup configuration, listing, and different functionality of backup and restore. Few more directories within var opt oracle. One is related to OCDs. That's again an assistant, like we will see the usage of that. The OSS is mainly dealing with your object storage. And how we take backups are like two things. One is automatic jobs via cron tab and OnDemand on a VM. So once you will configure your backup configuration for a database, these things will be kicked in. So automatically the backup will be executed, and it will be a level 0 backup or incremental backup depending on the backup policy in place. And you have always an opportunity to invoke a backup on demand, and that backup can use any kind of tag, or like you can keep it for maybe longer term retention policy, or like keep with option of forever. So depending on the scenario, like you have abilities to use these tools and configure your backups. To get started, as I said in the beginning, like we need to create a backup configuration file, and the backup configuration has to be done from first compute node of Exadata Cloud Service. So this is very important. All the backup configuration has to be done from the first compute node. of XRCS. And you can always determine the first node by logging as grid user. You can specify OLS nodes -n, so that returns you how many nodes you have in the cluster. Based on their names, you will be able to identify this is going to be my first compute node. So once you have identified your first compute node, SSH to that particular node, and for doing SSH, you will be using user as OPC, and OPC user has sudo privilege, so it can go to grid, or it can do a sudo to Oracle or sudo to root. So once you log into your first compute node, just log in as root from there using sudo, and then you have to create a new backup configuration file. You can create this file anywhere in the temp directory or on the Oracle home, or any place which you access. So in my example, I'm going to create this file under var opt oracle ocd assistant backup, and that will be used for scheduling backup on both the disk as well as object storage. If you are going to store the backup on disk or not, that is a design consideration you might have already factored during provisioning of XRCS system, because based on your selection, if you want to have a local backup, the recovery area is going to have enough storage which will satisfy the backup or archive logs or those kind of things in place. So once you create this file, we will save the file, we will set the permission, and then we will be going ahead with installing that configuration for the database. In this example, I'm navigating to var opt oracle ocd assistant backup. I create a backup.cfg file. This particular file could be empty by default. So you can take a look at when you log in to your compute node that if this file should be there most likely, but it will not have any record in it. You can enter the values, and I have taken an example. I have logged into root on my system. This is my first compute node, and the content of backup.cfg is backup configuration files equals to yes, backup underscore disk is yes, backup disk recovery window, backup OSS. For getting details on these parameters, what exactly they mean, like backup daily time or backup OSS recovery window, it is mostly like self-explanatory, but we are talking about both kind of backup. So it's a disk backup also, as well as backup OSS, which is nothing but the object storage backup. The another thing, if you note here, is like I have backup OSS URL, and this is the URL of my object storage. This OCIOB enablement is my tenancy, like identity domain, and bal xd bucket is the bucket which I have created for holding the backup pieces. So you will have your own OSS URL that you can find out in your tenancy, and then you need to have the OSS user. So in my case, like this is my user ID which has access to this particular bucket in my tenancy, and then you have already created a auth token, and in my case OSS password, this is nothing but the auth token for your object storage bucket. So these are related to your cloud backup, these three parameters basically, and also the fourth one, backup OSS. I want a cloud backup also in my environment. Then once you have like these details in place, put it there in this file, and you can also specify backup daily time. In this example, I have given 5 o'clock, right? So I just wanted to test like how they work, but based on your maintenance window, you are going to change this particular time. So make it the time window you want. Then backup cron entry. So what it does is like you will set a cron entry also, which will automate your day-to-day backup. So I have selected it as yes. So with these parameters, you have specified the minimum values which is needed for your backup configuration. Means I want backups on my recovery area as well as on my cloud object storage. And then you need to set permission as 600 to this backup. Change the ownership of this to root. It is not required if you are already logged in and creating it from root user. So with that, like backup configuration file is created, and we'll proceed to look at the second step, which is installing backup configuration. Just a little concept on this. So you have to use the command like backup cfg specified with like the configuration file you have created, and then the database name. And you can have one or more databases on your XRCS environment. So what this command is doing here is it will make the backup configuration which we have already created effective for the database which we supply here. So database name can be any database name for which you don't have backup configuration already done. So this is the method of setting it or installing it, you can say. So once backup is scheduled via cron, it will be also available, or you can open up etc cron tab, and it should show you that there are a few entries which are created for getting this backup done. So when the scheduled backup runs, you will be able to also check the progress of that one. We will be using var opt Oracle backup API, and within this one we have backup underscore API with backup underscore status command will show you the progress of your backup. There are a few options we discussed while configuring this backup configuration file, and this particular link has the details on all those parameters, so you can take a look at it. One of the note is, like, if you have used object storage as a backup destination, you can display the backup files in your bucket in the console or on the storage page by selecting object storage. So obviously, like, you have access to your OCI console and you'll be able to log in, and you can go to navigate to object storage page, and then you'll be able to see the bucket which you already created earlier, and inside the bucket you would be able to list all the objects as part of the backup which is taken like daily level 0 or level 1. The another thing is, like, a backup configuration can contain the credentials to access the object storage bucket, and that is the reason you might want to remove the file once you have successfully configured your backup. Okay, so with that concept, now we already have a configuration file created, and we have the important parameters for our cloud backup as well as local backup. So now it is time to make that backup effective. And for doing that one, we call it installing the backup configuration. And the step you will navigate to your directory, or it has to be done from the root user again. So you will be executing a backup API set config command, and under config file, like, you have to provide the backup CFG which you have already created, and then you need to specify the database name for which you are going to make this backup configuration effective. So in my case, the database name is BMS prod, and I'm going to set this backup on this database. So once you execute this command, it will provide you a bit of logging here. So you can see that, like, Divas backup API version and xn is set config, and there is a log file associated with that. So this log file can be tracked later to see what's going on behind the scene. Configuration file used for installing the backup is listed out here, and then it will validate all the parameters. If everything is fine, the process will get started. So you will see a PID, which can be again used for tracking it. Like, you can use always a ps-ef grep PID, and you'll be able to track what's going on with this particular command. Just for backup activity log, I have given a tail of this backup API.log, which I received from the command execution. And in this one, you can clearly see that I have given a backup to be started at 5 o'clock. So just for testing purpose, this is not the complete output of the command, provided you, like, what was going on with that command. So it says that, like, backup configuration has just started running on my node, first node of XRCS. By default, it has given a tag to that particular backup, and backup has succeeded here at this one. So in that command, like, once the backup is done, it is also given a tag, and then what it has done, it has started the archive log backup here. So var opt assistant backup, o backup, db name, archive log, and the UUID. Even it shows the archive log backup is completed for my database. So this is the step to install the backup configurations here. Another thing, like, even before attempting this backup configuration, you might be interested in knowing if there is already a backup set for the database. So how you would be able to know that one? Backup API provides backup check config command as an argument, and you can specify with any database name you want to check whether backup is there or not. In this example, I have logged into root user, and then I'm specifying this backup API with backup chk cfg argument, passing the database name in it. The output of that one is it has checked, it is again creating a backup API.log and O backup, which is showing that wallet is in open state. So it uses a security wallet. So all of the backups, either on OCI object storage or local backups, they are all encrypted. Whether you configure like backup on both or like just on cloud or on local, it is going to be encrypted all the time. So it checks that Oracle database state is up and running, and then only it would be able to provide you these configuration details. The configuration file, it says yes, like there is a configuration file also which is getting backed up. The most important is the type of the backup, which in this case it shows disk OSS. So disk OSS means local disk and OSS. It could be either disk, it could be OSS or disk OSS. So 3 values depending on backup you have set, right? If you don't have any backup configured already, this parameter will have no values in it. So it will show you empty. So moving next, now we have seen how to configure a backup. Means first we created the backup configuration file, then we used the setconfig command to make the backup effective, or we installed the backup. Once you have the backup configuration in place, you want to definitely create a on-demand backup also, depending on the need. So you can use the backup API utility again to create an on-demand backup of a database. And for doing that one, you need to log into your compute node in the Exadata database system and log in as OPC and sudo to root user. You can then let the backup follow either the current retention policy, or you can create a long-term backups. Each database is having a backup configuration in place. So if you want to use the same backup configuration, you can go ahead and run the command backup start, and it would be able to do that. But you can also create a long-term backup which can have a different purpose that persists until you delete it. Other backups which are getting done will be deleted based on the your retention policy. So if you want to create a backup that follows the current retention policy, you need to just specify backup API with backup start and the database name equals to database name tag. This will take a backup based on the current retention policy. In case like you want to create a long-term backup, you will have to use a few more clauses that is called a keep. In this case, it is the same API backup start -- keep, and then you are going to specify the database name. So this backup which is getting created by keep clause will be not deleted based on the current retention policy. So this could be a monthly backup, or maybe quarterly backup, or yearly backup you want to retain for some or other purpose. That's the reason like we have provided this option. Another situation could be like you want to specify a custom backup tag. You have ability to add a tag in your backup script. So here like same API backup start, and I wanted a long-term backup, means not based on just the current retention policies. That's why I've used the keep clause here. And then I also want to specify a tag which is monthly in my case. So this backup will be created and it will have a monthly tag which will help you differentiate that this is not a normal backup, but it's a long-term backup. So you can always check the progress of the backup process, and for doing that you need to run backup status -- database names for the database which you have started backup. This will show you the progress of that particular backup process. If you want to list the available long-term backups, the command is a little different here. Like you can use backup API, then recover list -- keep database name, and followed with a database name. So it is going to display you all the available long-term backup within the XRCS system. So just few examples here. I'm doing a backup API list, and it is showing me all the available backups which is there in the system. So these all tags, like these are default tags available. It is happening automatically. They are all incremental types here. I have just removed most of the lines to show how they look like when you use the backup API command to list the database backup. As I said, like I created a long-term backup. I want to see a list of that. So I have used backup API recover list command, and it is showing you all the backups which are taken for long-term retention. Long-term retention will tell you that this particular backup is not a normal backup, and it will also show you the tag associated with that. So we have seen how to set the backup by creating a backup configuration file, and various ways of doing on-demand backups, specifying keep clause for a long-term retention. Now we'll take a look at how we want to delete a backup. So to delete a backup of database deployment on Exadata database system, you can always use backup API utility. You need to again connect to the first compute node using OPC user, and you need to sudo to root. Before deleting, you might want to list the backup, and this is what is going to list like all the backups within the database. To list the available backups, recover list is going to provide you basically all the backups which you have already taken earlier. So database name is the database name for database you want to act on. And once like you have all the list available, you can select which backup you want to delete. So for doing that one, you will be using backup underscore delete keyword here, and then you have ability to also provide backup equals to based on the tag and the database name. So backup tag is the tag of the backup you want to delete. To delete a full backup, keep forever backups, you are using the backup API backup delete and then the tag associated. So it is going to delete a backup which is with keep clause. If you want to delete a backup in object storage, you can also do like you can connect to rman delete backup commands to delete a backup from the object storage. Okay, so now we will take a look at how to update the password by backup API utility. You've seen when we started, I had to provide object storage credentials, and there are chances that you will be updating it as part of maintenance or your policy within the organization. You need to change the passwords time to time. In those cases, you should have a way to really update the password for your backups. Another use case could be your backups are not happening and you don't know why my backups are not getting done on cloud storage. This is for OSS authentication check or updating the password. It will be useful. First thing what you can do is you go ahead, log into your first compute node and issue this command. So curl -v-x get the OSS URL which we seen earlier, -u, the user ID of the OSS. So in my case, it was bal.sarma@oracle.com, followed by colon and the password of that one. So password is nothing but the auth token which we created earlier. So when you will run this one, it should come up with the HTTP response, and that response should be a valid response. So that will be 200 HTTP/1.1 200. Okay, so that will confirm that you are able to reach out to your object storage. If not, it will stop there, and definitely you will look into whether the password is changed or if the bucket name is correct. So those could be the possibility. Just for verification, you need to get a HTTP response 200 in this case. Then only the backups will happen on your Oracle object storage bucket. Another step is to verify the password is stored correctly in the wallet, and all the wallets are within the U01 app Oracle admin. Under SID, you have DB wallet binary. So you can invoke that one DB_wallet list that will show you the list of values. You can also look for the view entry, and it will show you if they have the correct credential store or not. Modifying the wallet is easy. You need to create a file with just one information, that is password equals to the new password. Change mode of to 600 again. I have given it name as bal.cfg, and then you run the command backup API update wallet here with the configuration file which you have already created. So this is password file is my new password configuration, and the example shows the same, like you are using backup API update wallet and with the new configuration file. So if the password is changed in object storage bucket, you are going to change it here also, but you'll have to use the update wallet command. We have seen till now how to deal with the backup configurations, and now we will take a look at how to restore using those backups which we have already taken. Backup API again provides various options. These options are for recovery includes backup tag. Using backup tag, you can do restore. You can use the system change number. You can do point in time recovery. You can restore from the latest backup, and all the restore related operations will be logged under this Oracle directory. So where opt oracle log, then followed with db name /oracle. Take a look at the example here. I'm doing a var opt Oracle backup API recover underscore start. So this is the clause I have to specify if I want to do a restore operation or recovery operation within my Exadata environment. And I'm passing the database name here. The available options are recover start to latest or to a specific SCN, to a tag, to for a long-term retention backup, perform a full backup recovery, which is with keep option. This backup JS to 2014 with a keep clause. Or it also performs a recovery to the specified UTC timestamp or non-UTC. So these are various options available, and you can select which recovery option you want to go with. For my database, I have given this command backup API recover start. You are able to see different log associated with that. Process started with a PID, and you can always grep for this one, and it is showing that this process is running, like user bin pod or this is the tool which is getting invoked inside, and it is doing a backup restore from the latest backup. So here I have given the clause latest for my restore operation. In my case, like these were the various options available, but I went with the latest backup for my recovery purpose. When you will start a recovery, you can always monitor that one, the recovery status, using the APIs again. Backup API recover status is going to show you what's going behind the scene. Recover status is the keyword here, or the argument you can say, and specify the database name. This is not the complete list, but I have truncated the output. It is doing all the checks before the recovery process. Database was open, checked for P file was present. It shut down the database, changing the instance to the mount mode. It is a shutdown abort completed here, and then I invoke the OnDemand, right? So latest backup was with this particular tag, and it was continuing with the database recovery. So again, like shut down the database completed, it mounted with that one, then stopping the grid DB. So all of these steps, and recovery operation was completely done after that one. So return code 0 indicates it was a successful recovery from there. The same command, like it is shown like as the exact step, like what it did in my environment. Now we'll look at how you know your current backup configuration using backup API. So we've seen like how to configure it, how to install it, how to do on-demand backups, how to do restore. But there are situations that like you want to modify your backup configuration. So you need to know what are the different values which is effective in your Exadata environment. So you can always use the get config command here, and the get config info command will get the values from the backup configuration. So what you need to do is like you will be logging as OPC user, sudo to root, and then you are able to list the values of a backup configuration setting with this get config info command. Again, same API with get config info -e, and then the configuration and the database name for which you want to know that one. If you have more values, like you can also pass a JSON file for getting those configuration in place. And these configurations values could be like any configuration parameter which you have created, or like not created, but you want to see the value of it. So it could be backup CFG DB spec or CFG files, backup CFG OS. It could be backup underscore OSS recovery window. So these are the parameters for which you want to see what value is already set before you can even modify them. So a few of the examples for knowing your current backup configuration. So using this API, what I'm doing here is like backup API get config underscore info. Then I'm interested in knowing what is value of backup OSS user. So -f entry is for you can just specify -e, and then you can tell which parameter value you are interested in. So I want to know what is my backup OSS user. So it will run and it will return that this particular value is set to this particular email address. Similarly, any of those entries you want to know, like backup OSS URL, for example, right? So in my case, the URL is this one. Here I want to know like whether what is the value of backup underscore OSS. So backup OSS tells you like if you have a cloud backup set. So it is set to yes, means I have a cloud backup enabled. Backup configuration files equals to yes. So backup configuration file value is set here. So it is showing that like, yeah, we have this parameter set. So this is one of the example like how you will know different values of your current backup configuration. You would be interested in knowing like all the values, and we have multiple ways to find that out. So for example, knowing your current backup configuration using backup API, here you don't have to pass an entry. Just leave that field blank. Means with backup API, I'm just passing the get config info as an argument and the database name. So it will list you all the values within the database system, what is configured and effective. So for example, I have backup config file, backup daily time is set to 5 o'clock, backup disk is also set, and my backup OSS parameters, backup user, backup script location, backup type is set to disk OSS, which means like both the local backup as well as cloud backup. So this is the way you can know in your environment like what are the values. Another way to know your current backup configuration is using CREG, and you can do cat var opt oracle CREG. With respect to each of the database, whatever database you have configured your backup for, like you should have an entry .ini file in this CREG directory. So this ini file is nothing but it will have the backup configuration related details. So you can grep for backup and it will show you all the values for which is already effective for your backup configuration. So again, the same values, different commands or different places to know is what I wanted to show here. So once you know the values, like you can customize the automatic backup configuration, and for customizing it, again, you need to log in to your Exadata compute node, and I will just like to log into your first node as a root user, and then you need to specify backup API commands like get config. It is going to anyway show you all the backup configuration, and we would be able to also change the specific values. These are the customizable parameter for backup configuration, and this list is really big. I'm not getting into all of them. You can read this one in the documentation link which we shared earlier, but more importantly, backup to disk, backup configuration files, cron entry, backup OSS user password. These are the one like you have to really see they are set correctly or not. So if you want to modify any values in it, you will be using the file containing the updated backup configuration. And even for configuring a backup, we created a file, and if you want to even modify it, we have to go ahead and create a new file with the new configuration, and we will again installing it. Here you will be creating a file. You will specify the file name with the path, and that will again go through the same command, backup API set config command, and that new value will be effective. So once you make any modification to your backup configuration, you can always check with backup API configure status. So backup API configure status command is going to tell you the configuration update you have done. So one thing to note here is any change you are going to make to your database environment for backup related using backup API, they are not getting reflected in the Oracle Database Exadata Cloud Service Console. So at present, we are not providing any information in the console, which might change. We will have backup configuration, normal DBAS, we have all the managed backup or automatic backup configurations taking in place. But Exadata Cloud Service, we don't have any, which might change in the future. But whatever changes you will make, you won't be able to validate it in the console. So if your backup configuration includes backup CFG files equals to yes, so this is an important parameter. Then each backup includes system and database configuration files, which is equally important to not only data files or the database backup is important, but the binaries and the configuration file. So they will go to a directory specified in oscfg.spec file and the dbcfg spec file. So both files are located under var opt oracle dbus_scfs/backup and the database name, where db name is the name of database that is associated with backup configuration. How these backups are getting done, you have set the backup using those files, you installed them. So you would be able to see an entry in your cron tab because we made an parameter in our backup configuration file to have this entry as yes, right? So if you take a look at like under etc cron tab, it will have certain entries with respect to your backup. And this is what is highlighted here. Like I have backup API backup start for my database, and that backup is getting done at 5 o'clock. This is what I said during initial backup configuration. So there is a corresponding entry. For the same archive logs, like by default it is 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes it is going to do the archive logs again on the same disk as well as cloud backup. So let's get started with the demo. I have logged into my Oracle Cloud Infrastructure console. Before getting into backup recovery aspects, I will take you through the prerequisite steps. And for doing that one, I'm just logging to my Exadata environment. So in my Exadata environment, I have two subnets, client subnet as well as backup subnet. And I want to make sure this backup subnet has access to object storage bucket. And for doing that, we will take a look at if I have a service gateway which is already configured, because that is something I might have already done before I deployed this Exadata environment. So you can check that by logging into your VCN. So I clicked on my VCN and I go to Service Gateway tab here in the left, and this Service Gateway shows that it is already configured with the name which is displayed here as well as the required services. And in my case, it is configured to all IAD service in Oracle Service Network, which also includes object storage. So this makes your, I would be able to reach out to object storage bucket. And the another thing is like service gateway is there, but there will be a corresponding routing rule which will give this particular access. So just take a look at the routing table. And in my case, I'm using Prev as my routing table, as you might have noticed on the Exadata page. So this will also confirm that there is a service gateway in place, and my routing is going to be through service gateway for my backup related purpose. So I have a NAT gateway configured here, but that's not the requirement for backups. If you need to access outside internet, then you will be configuring NAT gateway. But otherwise, for backups and for any services within Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, Service Gateway is going to provide that connectivity. So this is my first node of Exadata Cloud Service. So basically what you will do is like you will log in as OPC user, and then you have to find which one is your first compute node. So for doing that, I'm logging to my grid user, and then you can execute command OLS nodes -n, and it will exactly tell you how many nodes you have in the configuration, right, and which one is designated as node 1. So in my case, XD prod N53 GG1 is designated as node 1, and I am on the same node over here. So let me go out of the grid user, and for doing the rest of the demo, I have to log in as root user. So I'm logging to my root user here. As I said, like I have few databases already configured, and let me list it out. So I have these databases available to work on. So for configuring, like we discussed about few backup API commands. So let me see, like if I have some backups which are already taken using backup API. So list backup API commands list all the backups taken with the API, right? It is based on the schedule which I configured originally. Like once database was provisioned, I configured their backup schedules. So it shows me all the backup tags, their completion dates, what kind of backups they are, like whether keep is false or true. Keep equals to true is like for long-term retention, and this is showing me all of the backups available here. So what I wanted to show you is how to get started with setting up a backup first, right? For doing that one, like you need to create a configuration file, and then you have to make it effective by using backup API commands. So let's go into the var opt Oracle OCD Assistant and backup, and I have created a configuration file here. Let me show you the details in it. So these are my entries in the configuration file. I'll modify this file a bit. And I think things are looking fine. So what options I have provided is like I want a backup to object storage access. I have the credentials for my object storage here. The backup time, like when the backup is going to be executed. I will modify this time to so the process will kick in, and I will be able to track the details of that. So this looks fine. Like I will just go ahead and save this file. I will just make sure the ownership of this file is given to root user. So I will make change ownership to root for this file. So now the ownership is changed, and another thing I have to do is like change mode. This is already 600, so this should be fine. So for one of my database, which is listed here, I don't have any backup configuration done. This is the Exadata on the system. So let's check, like I want to execute the backup configuration for this database. So I will be using a set command, backup API set config command, where Auth Oracle backup underscore API, and I have backup underscore API inside this. Then set config file equals to, and the path of the file. So in my case, like it is under this directory. I'm just specifying the path of that file, hyphen db name and exadb. So let's see. So now I have tried to set the backup configuration. I can take a look at the log to make sure the backup configurations are getting done as I wanted. So from the log, you can see that backup configuration is going to take place. It should return, and it should say that the configuration was successful, and later I will verify if backup configurations are already done. So right now it is trying to register it into the database. I will open up another window to show you a few more commands meanwhile. I'm going to show you like backup related commands over here. So the first command I'm going to take a look at after doing the setting up the configuration, that should be you should be able to list out all the backups. And backup API list command is exactly doing that. It is showing you all the backups which are already taken. If you have taken a long-term retention backup, so you'll be able to list that out here using backup API recover underscore list. So you see that like I have a backup which is falling under long-term retention, that is tagged as monthly 2019-04. So whatever tag you provide, like while taking the long-term retention backup, it will reflect here in the backup window. So let's start a backup for the database. So I'm going to give this particular backup a name so that it will be easy for me to track. For specifying the tag, you can use tag equals to and then test backup, and I hit enter. So this is an example of on-demand backup, right? It is going to take some time, and then the backups will be taken, and we'll again use commands to validate that. Meanwhile, like I wanted to show you, since backup configurations are done like some certain times, like you need to validate if your object storage credentials are correct, or if that is working. I'm opening another window, and here I will execute that command. So meanwhile, my screen is back, so let me go back on the same. So you can track the backup related details from here, the log file. It will show you the progress of that backup. And it is showing that like registering the request, starting the backup, and it will this is the command executed for taking out that. So how you are going to validate if backup configurations are correct, right? So for doing that one, you need to use the curl command. This might be useful sometime, especially for troubleshooting the backup related issues. So with curl -v-x get, I have provided my URL here with the bucket information, then the credential and the auth token. So you should be able to get something HTTP status 200, which we discussed earlier. So let's take a look at in the beginning. So if you notice here, HTTP status 200 OK means it is able to validate my credentials are good. It has found the object storage bucket with user balsarma@oracle.com. So I was able to validate to that. So my cloud backup should be working fine. So if you have any issue, this response is going to be 400 here. So that will indicate that you have to look into either auth token or like in the suite URL like which you are providing. So there could be anything wrong, or the password could be wrong, so that you will have to correct. So since you have executed a backup, we can always check the status of that backup which are getting done, and again like you would be able to use command backup _ status, and it should show you like what's going on. So it is saying that like there is a new process. This process can be again tracked with OS processes and a starting DBAS backup process. So that is still not completed, but the backup job is started, and it is doing its backup to the destination which we have specified. Few of the commands like verifying the backup configurations. So you can use again the check config command, and that should return you. Sorry, I think like I had a mistake here. You can specify -- database name, and it will tell you that backup configuration, how it looks like, whether it's OSS backup or like local backup also, or both. So here it confirms that this particular backup is like disk plus object storage both. Another thing I wanted to show you like how you restore, right? Since one backup is already going, but before restoring, you definitely want to list like what backup you have. So for doing that, I will be using recover _ start, and then the command like latest. Latest is like the latest backup I want to use for my restore purpose. So if I leave this tag, like I first just want to list this out, you can use the recover status command, which will show you the recovery status. Like if you are doing already recovery with a specific tag or something, like you would be able to check that one. So this is showing me the last recovery status on my database. For doing a restore, you can use recover _ status. Then the tag with which you want to restore your database, then the database name. So I'm not going to enter this command since one backup is already going, but when I hit this, like, it will start the recovery from the backup tag, which is designated as latest in my environment. Let's summarize the topic. We discussed available options for performing backups on Exadata cloud service, including cloud backups on object storage and local backups. We discussed available tools as well, assistants which might help with the backup configurations. We briefly verified backup configurations through API and also learned how you can do specific changes. We also discussed few important checks in order to troubleshoot the backups. We covered several examples about listing backups, starting backups, on-demand backups, long retention backups, as well as restore operations within Exadata Cloud Service environment. As a note, we carried out these activities using API, which are provided by Oracle on Exadata Cloud Service. I will come up with another training module on backup and recovery about how automated backups works on Exadata Cloud Service when that feature becomes available for customers. Thanks for spending your time learning this module. I hope you find this training useful, and for more information, please log into our Oracle Cloud Infrastructure portal and subscribe to our learning portal on YouTube.